Welcome back. This is episode 219. This week, I'm joined by a special guest, Matthew Jarvis. Matthew is a financial advisor, and he runs Jarvis Financial, located in Seattle, Washington. And he's also the host of the Perfect RIA podcast, where he helps educate financial advisors on how to deliver massive value to their clients, and also, fittingly, the author of the book, Delivering Massive Value. So welcome, Matthew.
Ryan, thanks for having me on the show with you. You and I have worked together over the years, and so it's fun to see the great services you're providing to clients, and of course, great information on this podcast. So excited to be a guest.
Yeah, me too. There's obviously a lot of stuff we can talk about, but I thought it'd be great this week to talk about really how clients can maximize their retirement income. There's obviously a lot of different strategies out there with, once you've saved up a nest egg, like how do you then turn that into income? So this week I thought it'd be great to talk about what you use and what I use, thanks to being educated from you about this, which is retirement guardrails.
Yeah, I'm glad to talk about it, right? So for your listeners, for your clients, right, as you're approaching retirement, you spent literally your entire lifetime saving up this nest egg, right? And maybe your nest egg is a few $100,000, maybe it's a few million, like whatever the dollar amount, right? You've literally worked your entire life. And now you're standing at this precipice of how do I make sure this money lasts as long as I do, aka how do I never run out of money? But also, and this is the flip side of the coin, Ryan, and I know you talk about this with clients, which is how do I make sure I don't leave a mattress stuffed full of money? In other words, like I got one life to live, I have one retirement, I can't run out of money. That's not an option. But I also don't want to leave a mattress stuffed full of money because I saved all this money for nothing at that point.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the balancing act. And obviously, as I said before, there's a lot of different strategies out there. Like probably we'll start with one of the most popular, which is like the 4% rule, right? It used to be when you and I started 20 years ago, it was the 5% rule, right? Whatever your nest egg is, if you've got $1 million, you could take $50,000 a year. And if that money was invested in a mixture of stocks and bonds, you shouldn't ever outlive your money, right? And you give yourself a pay raise every year and it would probably work out.
Yeah, correct. And when people go and meet with most financial advisors or they go use most software online, at the end of the day, that's essentially what it is. They'll do a 100-page report. And at the end of the day, it'll say roughly, well, you have $1 million, and we're just using that for easy math. You can take out $50,000 every year for the rest of your life. But there's a couple big problems with that, Ryan, is one, what happens in really good years, right? Like this year, last year, really the last, 8 years since the financial crisis, the market's been going way up. And so if you in 2010 retired with $1 million and you've only been taking out $50,000 a year, you've left a lot of money on the table. But if we flip that the other way, let's say you retired in 2008 and then the financial crisis hit and you're still taking out $50,000 a year, you would have run out of money, most likely. And so this whole let's just pick an arbitrary date when you retire and set your retirement income for the rest of your life, no matter what, that's foolishness. Like we wouldn't do that anywhere else in life. Yeah,
definitely. The whole set it and forget it. Like, oh, I'm good. I've got my monthly deposit. It's all taken care of. But you have to be aware of what's happening. And that's, I think, a good way to delve into maybe why you started using retirement guardrails. Maybe tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the idea of retirement income guardrails, or formerly known as dynamic distribution rates, is basically a fancy way of saying when the markets are doing really well and our accounts are up, we'll take a little bit extra. And when the markets go down, because they go down, we'll just take a little bit less. And so for my clients, and Ryan, I imagine it's similar with yours, when the markets go down, like the 2008 financial crisis or when the COVID stuff hit and the markets went down, we just this is a year to tighten our belts a little bit. Maybe there's a trip that we'll skip. Maybe there's a home improvement that we'll put off another year, a car purchase we'll put off for another year. We'll tighten our belts until the markets come back up. And when they do, which they always have eventually, then we can go back to our normal spending.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? You spend more when things are good, spend less when things are bad.
Yeah, it's kind of like, make hay while the sun shines type of thing. The other place this really helps, Ryan, and this is really where I came to retirement income guardrails in my career, was clients would come in and they would say, Matthew, great news. I've decided to I decided to buy an RV. I'm going to spend $100,000 on an RV so I can drive around the country for the next however many years. Like, this is really my goal. Can I do it? And what most advisors will do is they'll type it into the software, and the software will come back and say, you can do that, but you'll have an 82% probability of success. In other words, there's an 82% chance that you won't run out of money. And Ryan, my clients like yours said, wait a second, 82%, that's not a good grade to begin with.
Yeah.
Is that like a B minus, I think?
Sure.
I'm not really sure. It's been a long time since I've been in school. But I didn't ask for a probability of success. Like, I have a binary outcome here. Either I have enough money or I don't. And if I do, I'll buy the RV. And if I don't, I won't. I need you to tell me definitively. And so with Guardrails, we can look and we can say, hey, as long as your portfolio balance is in this band and taking the money out, you're still within this band, awesome, take the money out. And then conversely, if this is going to put us outside the band, we just know that we need to adjust our income by a certain amount. Then we can make that decision together. It's not this like hope and pray that the software told us what we wanted to hear.
Sure. I mean, software can be very helpful, right? But I think what you're talking about is like Monte Carlo analysis, where it gives you a probability of success. And a lot of people would think, oh, I want 100% probability of success, but then that means you probably leave a mattress full of money because you play it way too safe that you're spending so little that you're going to leave a lot behind. And I'm sure your beneficiaries will be the ones that are enjoying the fruits of your labor,
Yeah, for sure they would be. And it really comes back down, Ryan, to our ability to be a little bit flexible with our income. And so if we can say, hey, listen, I'm willing to be a little bit flexible. Again, I'll take a little bit more in the good years, like right now. I'll take a little bit less in the bad years, like during COVID. We can end up taking a lot more out each year. So you mentioned the 4% rule, which is very common. Some people even say it should be cleared down to 3%. Yeah. Let's do some quick math there. 3%, if you have $1 million saved, which is no small feat, $1 million saved at 3% is only $30,000 a year. It's like $2,500 a month. That's not a lot of income for $1 million saved. Whereas if we're willing to be flexible, and again, the exact number is going to depend on a lot of variables, we can take out quite a bit more than that. Usually in this case, a few $1,000s more a month. If we're willing to be flexible.
Sure.
So it's a big difference. But you also can't go into this willy-nilly. And Ryan, I know you know this, but for your listeners, you can't go into this saying, hey, I'm willing to take less in the bad years if you're not in fact willing to take less in the bad years, right? So let's say, for easy math, you're getting $5,000 a month. A couple of bad years come, the financial crisis happens again. It goes from $5,000 a month down to $3,000 a month. Where are you going to cut the $2,000? Now, if you can look at your budget and say, yeah, we'll skip some trips, and we'll do some things, we can cut that. Perfect, no problem. But if you're looking at your budget and you say, hey, if I go from $5,000 to even $4,800, I'm not going to be able to make my mortgage payment, this approach will not work for you. So this is for people that are good with their budgets, they're good with savings, and they know how to adapt based on the reality, which is really what we did our entire careers, right?
Yeah.
When you got a bonus or a tax refund, you spent a little bit more. When that bonus didn't come through or you owed instead of getting a refund, you spent a little bit less. That's kind of just how adults go, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So what if somebody, things are so tight and they can't afford even a $200 or $300 like cut in their income? What do you usually suggest to them?
Yeah, so this is where it becomes, don't shoot the messenger type of thing. Sure. So I'll give you a quick example, Ryan. I had a person come in. He was a doctor, a very well-known doctor in our community, and due to some medical issues, he was having to retire rather abruptly. And he says to me, Matthew, great news. I've saved a lot of money. And I said, well, doctor, how much have you saved? He says, I've saved $1 million. I said, congratulations. That is a lot of money. That's a lifetime of hard work. So I write down $1 million. And I said, doctor, how much income do you need each year for your lifestyle? He says, I calculated that all out. I need $250,000 a year of income. Now, again, for some of your listeners, you might think, holy smokes, how does someone ever spend $250,000?
Sure.
Other listeners might be thinking, I couldn't get by on $250,000. That's not really the point here. The point is, I said to him, doctor, $250,000 goes into $1 million 4 times. Yeah. 4 times. Now, even if the markets are spectacular, everything goes gangbusters, never mind taxes. Let's say it's 6 times. Within 10 years, you will be out of money.
Yeah.
He says, well, what should I do? I said, there's only one thing you can do. You need to spend less money. And Ryan, in this case, he wasn't willing to do that. And I said, sorry, I just can't work with you. Like, I can't do magic here.
Yeah.
I can tell you what the numbers are. I can help you pay less in taxes. I can make sure your investments are set up ideally. I can take care of all these other things. Magic is not something I can do. And so back to your question, Ryan, if someone sits down with you and you say, hey, Social Security and your pension, if you have one, and your portfolio is X, if X isn't enough, that's not Ryan's fault.
Yeah.
We just have to balance this scale out.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, the solutions are work longer, right? That might not be a solution. or spend less, right? I mean, those are really your two options. Yeah.
Yeah, they really are. So, we've got to be able to stick with the strategy, and we got to just accept the reality of the numbers. We can all spend less, Ryan. I can spend less. You can spend less. We all have room.
We've gotten very accustomed, I think, like with the 2 household income most people have, and it's a lot of things that we, take for granted that generations before us never had, and they did fine without it. So.
Yeah, even earlier versions of ourselves, right?
True, yeah.
Ryan, you and I didn't know each other as younger men. I would imagine that we both lived on substantially less money at a different time in our life.
Yeah, definitely. So getting back to the guardrails. So the way I heard you explain it once is that, like, if you're driving down a windy road, this is your portfolio, and you want to make sure you have guardrails on the road to make sure you don't go off the road. Maybe explain a little bit about what these guardrails actually are.
Yeah, that's a great way to think of it. So again, we're going to use this $1 million balance, not because that's a magic number. It just makes the math easy for a podcast. So if you're listening and you're saying, hey, I'm at 600,000 or I'm at 3.8 million, still give Ryan a call. Ryan's a smart guy. He can handle all those numbers. For me, I'm going to use easy numbers. So if we've got $1 million, let's say we would set guardrails. That's like the center line of our road.
Yeah.
We would set guardrails at about $1.2 million and about 800,000. And because each day your portfolio is going to change, really each minute the market's open, the markets in your portfolio are going up and down. So in this example, as long as we stay between about $1.2 million and 800,000, any of the noise in between there we can ignore. Just like when you're driving down a windy road, as long as you stay between those lines, that's okay. There's going to be some bumps. There's going to be some sharp turns. You might have to touch the brakes. You might have to speed up. That's all good. Where we have a problem is if we go over the 1.2 in this example or under the 800. That means that we're bumping up against the metal railing on the side of the side, or we're hitting the rumble strip on the shoulder, and we need to make a course adjustment. And again, just like if you were driving down the freeway and you look down to change the song on your iPhone and you feel the rumble strip, you're going to adjust. We're going to do the same on your nest egg, either because the markets went way down or because you needed to take a lump sum of money. We're going to say, we hit the rumble strips. Let's course adjust. Let's get back to the center before we find ourselves in the ditch or off the cliff, however our analogy plays out.
Yeah, so let's just say like you go below that lower number, right, the 800,000, because you took money out or the portfolio didn't perform as expected. Like, what is your next step from there?
Yeah, so I'm going to use round numbers. Let's assume that on $1 million you were taking a dynamic distribution of $50,000 a year. So in that case, and again, this is where you're going to work with Ryan to get your exact numbers, because it's different for each person. Like, just like the doctor wouldn't give you a generic blood pressure medication, this needs to be specialized. But in this case, we'd cut our income by about $500 a month or so. So we would temporarily reduce our income. It doesn't go to zero. It doesn't cut in half. It goes down by about 10%. And then we adjust to that new amount until we get back to the center of the road. And again, it could be because the markets came back up. Could be because you added some money. It might just be that you said, I'm okay taking $100,000 out to buy an RV, and I'm okay that my income goes down by $500 a month. It's worth it to me to have the RV.
Yeah.
And it's just a trade-off, right? It's an educated decision.
So that would be a cut. And then do you suggest looking at this like quarterly or annually to evaluate these types of changes?
Yeah, for our clients, and Ryan, I know you do something similar. We like to look at with clients every calendar quarter. Now, if there's big movements in the market, or if you need to add or remove a big amount of money, we're going to look at it right then. But every calendar quarter, we want to look and say, hey, which way are we trending? If we're still right in the middle of the road, no big deal. If because of the elections or interest rate changes or world conflict, suddenly the market starts moving down quickly, we're going to start talking to clients and saying, hey, our buffer has gone from 300,000 down to 100,000. Let's start planning ahead so that if it keeps going down temporarily, we know what adjustments to make. And so by staying ahead of that, it really helps us. Because then the other thing this gives us, Ryan, and this is where I think most financial advisors go wrong. When the markets go down, what do they tell clients? They say, hey, just sit still. Well, none of us want to sit still when the market's going down. Now, what we can't do is panic and sell. Like, that's going to blow it up. That's what people did in the financial crisis and COVID. They'll never recover. What you and I tell clients is, hey, if the markets start going down, we don't need to do anything until we get to this point. And if we want to be proactive, we can go ahead and temporarily reduce our income. If we want to get a step ahead of this thing, let's be conservative and do that. But we're not just going to hope and pray it turns out okay, but we're also not going to panic and just wildly do things like a drowning person.
Sure. Yeah.
No.
And then let's say like the other scenario happens, like the markets do really well, or you maybe spent less than you were planning to, and now you've gone above that upper number, the 1.2 million in your example. What do you do then?
Yeah, oddly, this is often a harder situation psychologically to deal with. So, when we're retired and we say, they sit down with you, Ryan, you say, hey, the markets have been really bad. We just need to cut your income by a few $100s a month temporarily. We all get that. Like, we all get that I can't spend more than I have. That's how you're able to save money. What messes with our head is when we go over that upper guardrail, when we're saying, hey, we're going to proverbially die with a mattress stuffed full of money. We need to do something with this. That's where we say, let's go out and buy that RV, or let's take that trip around the world, or let's start flying first class instead of coach because we can afford it, or let's gift the money to our kids or to our favorite charity. The goal here is that we want to always be in control. We being you, Mr. and Mrs. Client, want to always be in control of this money. No matter how good your will is or your beneficiaries, that's not our goal. Like we don't want to leave this mattress stuff full of money. And so we need to do something about it. Not a cut. It's like the opposite of a budget, right? Bonus. It's almost like we all grew up like, hey, you have $1,000 a month to spend. Now we're saying like, hey, you need to spend this $1,000 a month, or gift it, or do something.
Yeah, I mean, I have this sometimes with clients. They're underspending, so to speak, and I try to encourage them to do things because I've heard this before. I don't know where you have the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years, right? The three phases of retirement. Like eventually, unfortunately, our health might fail us, or we can't do the things we want to do. So you might as well do it while you can and enjoy the money you've worked so hard for. Yeah,
I always like to remind clients, right, that you're the youngest and the healthiest that you're ever going to be. Like we're not getting younger. None of us are getting younger. No. And unless you have a temporary health issue, you're not going to get healthier. Like today is the day. And it's not like a carpe diem, let's blow the whole nest egg. Because again, Ryan, your clients and my clients are likely, as a married couple, one of them is going to make it to their 90s, just statistically speaking. We need to be planning for decades, but we can't be waiting. In our 90s, we're not going to be taking that big trip around the world.
Yeah, definitely. It gets more difficult.
Yeah. Something I would add on the guardrails, and Ryan, this is a shameless plug for you and the great work that you do, is it is very difficult to stick to the guardrails by yourself. Just like if you're going down a mountain road and there's no lines and there's no rumble strip and it's dark, that's a really tricky thing. That's why we have lines in the road and rumble strips and guardrails. Without someone's help here, it's really difficult to do it. It's really hard to stick to the system when the markets are way up and everybody's saying it's going to go up forever. And then when the markets are way down and people say it's going to go down forever, you really have to have some professional guidance there from a psychological standpoint. But also there's a lot of technical pieces, right? Like we explain this in very simple terms, right?
Yeah.
Upper guardrail, lower guardrail, stay in the middle, don't hit the guardrails, right? There's a lot going on there. We haven't talked about taxes. We haven't talked about the war chest. We haven't talked about interest rates. We haven't talked about buffers in place. How do we actually get the monthly income? So there's a lot of pieces here. Your job and my job, Ryan, is to keep it on the high level for everyone.
Sure.
But behind the scenes, there's a lot that goes on.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of this comes from, Jonathan Guyton, right? He's an advisor in Minneapolis, I think, is where he's located.
Yeah, I can't remember where Guyton's at. Yeah,
but he wrote an article for the Journal of Financial Planning like almost 20 years ago that tried to improve upon the basic 4% withdrawal strategy. To not do what you said, right? Leave a mattress full of money and have his clients over or underspend, so to speak.
Yeah, Guyton's done a lot of great work. Michael Kitces has written a lot of great things on his site about that. There's a lot of great resources out there. Still surprisingly low implementation, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're working with an advisor already, just go in there and ask them and say, hey, my portfolio is at X. Then again, the dollar amount doesn't matter.
Sure.
How far down does it have to go before I need to take less money, before I can't take whatever it is I'm taking? Or conversely, just kind of depending on where you're at, hey, if I pulled out $100,000 or $50,000 or whatever dollar amount, what would that mean to my monthly income? And if they give you any answer other than it means X, you have a problem here. If they're like, well, 2/3 of one and 1/3 of the other, you tell me what's up to you. What are you paying this guy for?
Sure.
You're just like if I go to my doctor and I say, hey, what should I do about my blood pressure? He's like, well, I don't know. You tell me. No, that's not what I need. That's not what I'm paying for. I need a specific answer. Yes, the future is unknown, No one knows what interest rates will do, what the market will do. We've got to, though, have a really solid strategy that we have total conviction in.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So what are some of like the, biggest issues you see with people that choose to use guardrails, whether advisors or clients doing it themselves, like that mistakes they make with this?
Yeah, a couple of big mistakes. One we touched on very lightly is this concept of a war chest. And so where people get in trouble, whether they're using guardrails or a 4% rule or whatever the case may be, is they're selling, let's say you're taking $1,000 a month. Every month they're selling $1,000 of their investments and they're taking it out. And the next month they sell 1,000 the next month. And when the markets are up, like they've been for the last, 8 years now,
Sure.
that works out okay. Where it doesn't work is when the markets start going down, because the lower they go, the more shares of your stock or a mutual fund or an ETF you have to sell each month. And what can happen when the markets go way down is you can sell, it's reverse dollar cost averaging. You can sell so many shares trying to cover your same $1,000 a month that when the markets come back up, you will not recover. We saw this in the financial crisis in 2008. So a solution to that, or a partial solution, is to set up what we like to call a 5-year war chest. We need 5 years worth of income that's totally protected from the markets, that's set aside. Yes, when the market's up 20%, it'll feel real dumb to have all that money sitting there in a war chest. But when the market's down 20% or down 50%, it's going to feel really good. Let's use the financial crisis again. Financial crisis got started in 2007, really got ripping in 2008. So let's call 2008 year one. 2009, 2010, 11, 12. Our 5 years is to end of 2012. Was the market back to whole in 2012? Not quite, but the worst of it was behind us. In other words, we managed to get through 5 years of the worst of the market without ever having to sell an investment while it's down. Now, the financial crisis, hopefully that's once in a lifetime type of thing. Yeah. But even COVID, even last year, the market's going to have dips. We need to make sure that we're not ever selling in the dip.
Yeah, so that would be like keeping it in money market or short-term bonds or CDs, whatever your preference is, right? That's liquid so that you can get it and that isn't really going to be impacted, for fluctuations due to interest rates or market volatility.
Yeah, correct. We typically like to keep about 1 year's worth in a money market or savings account, essentially, depending on interest rates. And then the other 4 years in, like you said, Ryan, short-term bonds or structured notes and things like that, so that we're earning as much interest as we possibly can. But again, we got to be careful there. People start what's called chasing the yield. They say, well, money market's paying X, and if I get this 20-year bond, I'll get a little bit more.
Sure.
There's a whole set of risks. That's a whole other podcast episode that we'd be getting into there.
Yeah, definitely. Your advisor through your own research can be helpful in that. And then I guess the more aggressive you want to be with this, or the less you have in your war chest, maybe, the more you could potentially take out and vice versa.
Yeah, we do have a few clients for various reasons. They can handle more fluctuation in their income. Maybe they have other income sources. Maybe their fixed expense, maybe their house is paid off and their fixed expenses are really low. We might shrink that war chest from 5 years to 4 or maybe 3. Or conversely, if a client's really concerned, we might go out to 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
But this is a strategy that works. Like for me, it's a non-negotiable. I keep going back to the doctor example. If the doctor says, hey, you need to take X blood pressure medication, I say, can I just take 4X? Like, can I get this taken care of more quickly? No. That's not going to work, right? There's a system here. The system works. Guyton talked about this in his white papers that he's written, that the worst time to retire, and most people get this wrong. So we look back last 150 years, when was the worst time to retire? Everybody thinks the Great Depression. They say, the 1920s, that must have been the worst time to retire because the Great Depression hit. Yeah, it does seem like that, right? Except when the Great Depression hit, prices went down. They went down dramatically, a thing known as deflation. That's a whole nother economic discussion. Yeah. But if you stayed the course, the Great Depression was not the worst time in history to retire. The worst time to retire in history was 1973, which is within the lifetime of most people listening to this. 1973, 74, markets go down 50%. So your $1 million becomes 500,000. Inflation goes through the roof, and it takes 15 years for the market to get back to even once adjusted for inflation. The guardrails worked through that period of time. They were literally designed with that period of time in mind. Now, could a worse scenario come along? Yeah, anything's possible. Anything's possible. But it worked for the Great Depression. and it worked for the 1973, 74, worst time in history to retire. This is a strategy that works. Don't mess it up.
Yeah.
Don't mess it up. Yeah.
Now, if somebody is totally adverse to volatility, right, then probably this strategy is not for them. I mean, yeah.
No. If you're going to lose sleep at night, right, if you can't, I don't want to say ignore it. Ignore is not the right strategy. If you can't understand the ups and the downs in the market, if you can't say, hey, this too shall pass, if you can't say like, hey, the world can only end once and odds are it's not today, right? Like if that's really your case, your guardrails needs to be set totally off the table. That's where we need to look at like insurance-based products and say, you need to hand off that risk to somebody else. You need to essentially create your own pension. But there's real costs involved with that. Like that's not a free option. The insurance companies, there's a reason their name is on stadiums. It's not because they're like short on cash, right? This isn't a nonprofit organization. So there are viable tools there, but those are not free tools. And anyone who tells you they are, run as fast as you can.
Yeah, there's definitely a trade-off. I mean, you could...
Oh, sure.
We don't have time to talk about annuities, but obviously you could use an annuity type solution if you wanted a guarantee. But you're not going to get as much potential income over time if we have just normal markets, the performance of normal markets. But again, if that helps you to sleep at night because you can't deal with, the stress of potential volatility, then that's the route you should go. Yeah.
I guess the point there is there's stops in between just leaving all the money sitting in the bank account earning. I think I looked the other day, Ryan, Bank of America is still paying 0.01%, which for those of you who don't know percentages, that's zero, right? Like they should just call it zero and call it a day. So there's stops between let's put it there and then the opposite extreme, which would be like, let's put it all in Tesla stock or something. There's a lot of options in between there. We've got to make sure we have one that works for you.
Yeah. And this is a very good solution for a lot of people, but not everything is right for every person either.
No. You gotta know what works for you. You've got to know what you don't know as well, right? As a consumer, even as an advisor, right? Like where do I belong and where do I need to bring in other experts, right? Like we haven't talked at all about taxes, and that's its own thing. We could have the perfect guardrails, the perfect investment strategy, and then get nailed on taxes. And by nailed, like it's not inconceivable to lose half or even 2/3 of your nest egg to taxes. That's totally within the realm of possibilities. So you could say, man, I made a gazillion dollars this year in the markets and I lost it all to taxes. You didn't win the game, right? Like I want to know how much money is in my bank account that I get to keep. That's what matters at the end of the day.
Definitely. Yeah. That can be a future episode. I had your brother on.
You can tell I'm real passionate about it. You can bring my CPA brother on. That'd be great.
Awesome. Well, I think we've covered a lot today. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with while we wrap up here?
Ryan, the only thing I would leave you with and your listeners with is that there's no harm in getting a second opinion on things. So a lot of times we say, hey, I've been doing this myself, or my spouse has been doing it, or I've been working with this buddy of mine. And that's great. And probably they've all been doing a great job, but this is your entire life's savings that we're talking about, right? This is like let's take just 1 second to reflect. Let's say you were given this terrible option between running out of money tomorrow and having to ask your kids to support you financially or dying. Which one would you pick? If tomorrow you had to choose between dying or calling your kids up to borrow money from them so you could stay in your house, which one do you want? Now, thankfully, this podcast is a one-way street because most people listening be like, I'll take death, right? I'm not trying to be overly morbid here. This is a major binary outcome. It either works or it doesn't. And so have somebody else take a look at this thing, keeping in mind that what's at risk here is having to call your kids and ask to borrow money. So give Ryan's office a call. I know I work with a lot of advisors all over the country. Ryan's one of the best. And that's why I'm honored to be here on the show. So get that second opinion.
Yeah. Awesome. And if anybody, I'll put Matt's contact information in the show notes as well, and the link to his podcast and book.
Please do.
So thank you, Matthew, very much for coming on this week. It was fun to talk about this. And as always, if anyone has a question they want to have considered for a future episode, you can go to retirewithryan.com, click on Ask a Question to leave that question. Thanks again, Matthew.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan.
Everyone have a great week, and I look forward to talking with you next Wednesday. Take care.